Hello, friends. Robert Bevan here, author of the Caverns Creatures series of comedy, fantasy novels, and short stories. With me is Sam West, and today we are talking. Oh, haha, sorry. Today is another Martial Monday, and we will be talking about the fighting style Blessed Warrior. Yeah.
Yeah, Blessed Warrior is a Paladin exclusive fighting style. I believe it's from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Is that his Xanathar Guide to Everything? I'm pretty sure it's Tasha's. Pretty sure this is a more recent addition to the game. It's very simple. You learn two cantrips of your choice from the cleric spell list. They count as paladin spells for you and use your charisma modifier. Whenever you get a level in the class, you can replace one of these cantrips with another cantrip from the cleric spell list. So you can like every level swap them out, which is pretty fancy. You get two of them. The cleric cantrips there are not many. There are very few. There's Guidance, Lice, Mending, Resistance, Sacred Flame, Spare the Dying, Thaumaturgy, To Hold the Dead, and Word of Radiance. So it's not the most robust list in the world, but it could be fine. Bob, what are your thoughts?
You know me. Free spells. Yay. Especially Paladins getting cantrip options. That's fun.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that may not be the most amazing cantrips in the world, but yeah, if I'm a paladin, I'm excited to get cantrips at all.
Which two of these cantrips would make your list?
Oh,
I know one of them for sure.
Guidance is the right
That's
answer.
The one.
That's
yep.
it. Yeah, I kind of want somebody else to have guidance, and then I don't have to worry about that. I don't know, maybe Toll the Dead or Sacred Flame, or I don't know. I feel like if I'm gonna get a damage, or if I'm gonna get a cantrip, I want it to do some damage, or I want it to do something amazing, and the rest of these aren't super amazing.
Here's my next question to you.
Mm.
On this paladin, what is your charisma score versus your strength, constitution, and dexterity? Quite a bit lower, right?
Strength, constitution, dex. Yeah, I guess it depends. I mean, I don't think I've ever played a paladin.
Fair. Paladins have they don't have it as badly as monks do, but there's this idea the acronym is MAD. I can't remember what it stands for, but the idea is you have a bunch of ability scores that you want to take to make your character feel like they're doing something powerful. So monks, for example, really want a high wisdom, they really want a high dex, they really want a high con because they're going to be taking damage sometimes. Paladins have a similar problem where you really want a high strength, so you can kill things with your greatsword or your sword and board longsword or whatever. You really want a high con because you want to be able to take a lot of damage. You don't necessarily need as high a dex, but it's helpful to have one for your dexterity saving throws against damage. Normally, whenever you're building a character, you get like a 16 and a 14. And that's going to be your best stat, which is normally going to be the thing you're attacking with, which is normally going to be, in this case for Paladins, your strength. And then you're going to have your sort of like second best stat. And in Paladin's case, you're normally picking between your charisma for your spell stuff or your constitution for your health. And most of the time, health tends to win out. And the reason health tends to win out is because your spell stuff tends to be Divine Smite. And Divine Smite doesn't care about saving throws. It doesn't give a damn what your charisma modifier is. Divine Smite does a flat 2d8 damage or 3d8 damage or whatever spell slot you think can do it X damage. You can get away pretty easily in a lot of classes that have spell save DCs of taking a low ability score for those spells because you can specifically aim your character at not taking spells that ask characters to make saves against your spell save DC or don't make spell attack rolls. Paladin is definitely in that camp. This leaves us in a spot where if you're taking a fighting style and it's going to be Blessed Warrior, we're forgoing any of the other fighting styles that will improve the majority of how you want to engage a fight. In exchange, if you take something like Toll the Dead, you're getting a D8 to a D10 or D12 damage, which, sure, that's fine. But that's worse than a D8 plus mod. That's definitely worse than a 2D6 plus mod. And those are your weapon attacks. Those are the things that scale with the rest of your character. Those are the things that work with your Divine Smite feature. Those are the things that you're going to probably want to be doing, given that you have heavy armor proficiency, given that you have all these other things. This leans me to say I probably would want cantrips that don't care about making attack rolls, since the bulk of my damage is already going to be coming from things I can already do. Paladins can take lances, they can take thrown weapons for ranged options. You have better ranged options than Toll the Dead. You have better melee options than Word of Radiance most of the time. Word of Radiance, I think, might be sneakily usable on Paladins in some niche instances. But for the most part, I find that Paladins would want to take cantrips to empower their out-of-combat exploration utility. You're basically trading some of your combat prowess for some out-of-combat utility. And then we come to what you just said about guidance. I want someone else to have it. I don't want to necessarily be the one that deals with it. And so much
that's
of the
just
time,
me being selfish.
Sure. So much of the time at parties, you're going to have a frontline dude. You're going to have a big burly thing that's soaking damage and taking hits, like your barbarian, your paladin, your fighter. In some niche cases, your warlocks or monks. Then you have your backline characters, which are normally going to be like a rogue, a ranger, and a full caster of some variety. And because most of the full casters of some variety can get access to guidance, you don't necessarily tend to need to have that burden, because you don't really want a group that typically, how guidance tends to get played, you don't necessarily need it more than once. One person with guidance is doing the guidance thing enough where for the vast majority of out of combat checks, you're adding the D4, which lands it as like, okay, if you don't have that in the group, this is a way to get that, and that's pretty solid. If you do have that in the group, then you don't really need it. And if you don't really need it, you're taking like mending and
I'm not
thaumaturgy?
taking mending. I'm
Then
not
what
taking
else are
bad
you
habit.
taking?
I don't know. Maybe God.
And
I'm
thus we
probably
run into
not
our
taking
problem with this.
this fighting style.
Yeah, I think it sounds better than it reads, or sounds better than it actually plays, just because the actual reality of cleric cantrips is they aren't very high impact. They tend to be pretty niche. There aren't like minor illusion or mage hand levels of fun. There's not even like a vicious mockery, very high thematic outside of thaumaturgy. Thaumaturgy is fine. I'm more of a fan of thaumaturgy than you are, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's exceptional. And you have to remember this is coming at a cost. And that cost is not access to the protection fighting style. It's not access to the interception fighting style. It's not access to the great weapon fighting styling, or great weapon fighting style. You're choosing to take this over empowering something you're going to be regularly doing in combat. And that is a really big downside. That is something that you're no longer going to be able to reroll that low damage dice on your greatsword or your maul. You're no longer going to get that free +1 AC. And listen, defense isn't my favorite, but it does something. And oftentimes you're going to feel like you took cantrips that don't really do anything because light's a glorified torch and thaumaturgy is mainly for flavor.
Yeah, having a look at those cleric cantrips has kind of changed or soured me on this one.
I don't think it's unusable. I think there will be a handful of characters at very specific tables that can get a lot of mileage out of things like Word of Radiance. So something that Paladins could use to empower them, if you wanted to play more of a character that is good against hordes, if you want to be the horde breaker, last line of defense, I'm playing in the zombie apocalypse, Word of Radiance scales with your total level, so it doesn't care about your spellcasting modifier outside of the save that it's imposing. If you're planning on getting covered in zombies, if you're planning on diving into a giant pit of snakes, if you're intending on being in environments where there are huge quantities of stuff around you, Word of Radiance is better than making an attack roll against a single thing. It lets you say, I am good enough at hitting one thing with my greatsword. I can take an option that lets me expand out and be more versatile. I think that's where this sort of finds a home, is you take like Word of Radiance guidance, and then you have a character that is doing the guidance thing out of combat when you have another character that does that, and has a bit more flexible utility in specific environments of doing 3d6 damage to all the things around me, or I hit something like a truck for, 8d8 damage or whatever it is whenever I whack it with my greatsword. You have those two axes to fight on that makes it a little bit more interesting.
You're talking about one instance, though.
Yep.
Like, I don't think this is something you can plan on doing regularly, like pits of snakes, or even hordes of zombies. I mean, unless the whole campaign is, Walking Dead, and there's just mobs of them everywhere. Then, and still, even then,
hold on,
is that going to be like so much better than whacking them one by one with your sword?
Having run a zombie apocalypse campaign, the answer is yes. The answer is Word of Radiance is a very big player at the table there. I think of the characters at our party, like 3 of the 4 players had it because it was that powerful of a feature. That I had to start shaping encounters around it. I think the entire campaign was 6 levels total, so it's not like we did like this huge full campaign scope spanning one. So my sample size is still quite low, right? But Word of Radiance was very good in many of the big horde encounters, and there were regularly large horde encounters.
Yeah.
But you definitely are right in saying that the vast majority of environments are not that. The vast majority of tables are not playing, even in the Walking Dead worlds, even in zombie apocalypses. How I DM specifically, I love running lots of little things. I like having lots of low HP, 5, 6 HP monsters that players can pick off and feel satisfied with, being like, I killed that, I killed that, I killed that, I killed that. And it makes the encounter scope feel really overwhelming, yet they can still fight it off and be victorious. That's how I like to DM. So me as a specific DM in a specific environment, it would have been good on that one character. And it's still like, is this really better at a fighting style? Because there is a real downside. You are doing the fighting style thing worse against the bigger threats, against the big monsters you're making 2 attacks against around. You are losing out on one of those fighting styles that you do care about. That is a real trade-off. That is to say, I don't think this is unusable. I just think this is very narrow. And that makes it pretty bad to me. I'm glad it exists. If there ever get better killer cantrips, we can come back and talk about this again, because where it stands right now, it's probably not worth it. But it's fine. It's not the end of the world. It's a pretty fair trade-off, I think.
Let me ask you, in the zombie horde situation,
Yes.
is Word of Radiance destroying all the zombies? Or is it just...
At 9th level, yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, and again, your mileage is going to vary. So zombies in the monster manual tend to have a lot more HP than I like to give zombies, because I don't think zombies with 30 HP are particularly fun, because they don't do any damage. They just sit there and take a beating, and you're like, what are we doing here? It's got a +1 to hit and does a d6 +1 damage. This isn't a threat. Why am I whacking this corpse for 10 minutes? Like, it's not a particularly fun experience. So I tend to run to zombies that have
that sounds
lower
like a
pools of
blast to
HP.
me.
It's like, oh, look at these 3 cadavers that aren't a real threat to us. I guess we'll just poke it with a stick until it dies. That's how I've often felt low tier zombies in D&D. That I don't like zombies.
But if you're a paladin, then
a paladin smiting one will kill a zombie in 1 hit. Right. I would much rather be killing a more important undead than that, because again, the zombie isn't posing a real threat to you, so you don't need to be, unless there are huge groups of them.
All right, that was my argument.
Yeah,
like in that case, if you're just injuring the zombies, I guess 2 instances of Word of Radiance. Yeah.
And a very important detail about zombies, they have a thing called Undying Fortitude, so if they would die by dropping by non-radiant damage or a critical hit, they don't. They get a save, and if they save over the damage, they stay alive. Radiant does radiant damage, it just outright kills them. We're more talking about Word of Radiance than we're talking about Blessed Warrior. Which, I mean, it's fair, because it's like one of the only redeeming options I see in here. And again, like you've been really hammering home, it is unbelievably niche to like how I specifically run zombies, and in a very specific narrow window of play, right? We're talking about like 9th level where it's doing just enough damage, or like 5th level where it's doing just enough damage on my tables, right? We're talking about a circumstance where the zombies have less HP than they are printed with, that still have those abilities. This is incredibly niche. This isn't the vast majority of times. And I think 90% of tables, Blessed Warrior is just not worth it.
Yeah, man, it really hurts me to agree with you on this, because free spells. That's
just... If you don't have guidance, it's fine. If you have guidance, it's less fine. So that's where I think this ultimately is. It's like a binary. Do you have a druid or bard or cleric with guidance?
All right, well, how is that going to factor into your rating? What?
Bards don't have guidance. If you have an artificer, cleric, or druid with guidance, one of those 3. That is less likely. So there you go.
All right, well, how's that factor into your rating?
That's a great question. I think ultimately, what this sort of thought experiment does, I think it's good to exist. I think this is a good fighting style to exist. That being said, I can't ever imagine taking it, so I think it gets a 1. I think this is so narrow and so niche. I wouldn't ever even knowing you're going into a zombie apocalypse game, I wouldn't to be playing at the table and know the DM. I need to be DMing it to be able to be like, this will be worth it as having a flexible option in your combats. Because the vast majority of the case, I still think that's not the case. I think the most tables, there's not going to be a good enough reason to take this over any of the other fighting styles. And for that reason, I don't think it justifies it's coming on your sheet. Even with guidance, there's more affordable ways to get it. You are foregoing a really important part of your character. I don't think you can take this.
I'm gonna think long term. I know.
If they print better stuff, yeah, it's a
2. All right, that's what I was gonna say. Someday Wizards of the Coast may print better cleric cantrips, and for that, I'll give this a 2. Mostly because I've agreed with your rating for the last 3 videos. So okay. 2 it is.
Yeah. Again, I really want to hammer home. I like that this exists. I can't see this being worth taking. It just costs too much. 2 cleric cantrips are normally not that good, and they're not better than the fighting styles they're going to be using every single fight. So, yeah,
agreed. This is probably a 1, but giving it a 2 just to be contrarian.
And hey, future-proofing yourself. They're going to release a busted cleric cantrip next week, and I'm going to look like an egg on my face.
All right. Well, commenters, let us know what you think. Yeah, what did we miss? What awesome cleric cantrips would you choose with this, and that would make this worth taking over a different fighting style?
Yeah.
Let us know.
Guidance isn't that good.
Yeah. All right, that was Blessed Warrior. Thank you, Sam, and thank you everyone for joining us. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, informative, or entertaining, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button below. You needn't smash it, a gentle tap will suffice. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to the channel. And make sure you check out the links in the description where you'll find my Caverns Creatures series of comedy fantasy novels, Sam's full review of the spell, and other fun things.